I want you to imagine this. Two yoga teachers both have a student with chronic shoulder pain walk into their class. Both teachers completed the same 200-hour training and both want to help. Teacher one says, here's a bolster for child's pose and skip any arm movements that don't feel good. The student leaves feeling a little bit unsupported and eventually stops coming to yoga altogether. Teacher two says, let's understand what your shoulder is telling us and work with your nervous system to create safety while we explore gentle movement. 6 weeks later, the student has improved range of motion, reduced pain, and tells everyone that yoga saved her shoulder. What if I told you the difference between these teachers is one limiting belief that's keeping 90% of yoga teachers from truly helping their injured students? That belief, all I can do is offer modifications and props. This belief is costing you the opportunity to be a transformational yoga teacher. And today I'm going to prove that you already have the scope, the ability, and the responsibility to do so much more than what you're currently offering. Now, I know exactly what just went through your mind, but Monica, I can't diagnose or treat injuries. That's not my scope of practice. I could get in trouble. I'm not qualified for that. That skepticism is completely valid. I felt the exact same way. For years, I watched students struggle with pain and told myself I was staying in my lane by only offering props and modifications. But what if the very thing you believe is protecting you and your students is actually the thing keeping you from being the healing centered teacher you dreamed of becoming? What if modifications and props are just the beginning of what you can offer, not the end? What if there's a whole world of therapeutic support that's absolutely within your scope of practice that you've never been taught? My name is Monica, and over a decade ago, I was exactly where you might be right now. A yoga teacher who felt helpless every time someone with an injury walked into my class. I remember the student who changed everything for me. This student had a meniscus tear and she'd come to my class because she still loved yoga. In my 200-hour training, I was taught to offer her props, modifications, and tell her to listen to her body and skip poses that didn't feel good. After 2 months, she wasn't better. She was actually getting more fearful of movement. I began to realize I was failing her, not because I wasn't qualified to help, but because I wasn't using the full scope of what movement educators can actually offer. I committed to learning everything I could about pain science, nervous system function, and therapeutic movement. I've since completed over 2,000 hours of continuing education in biomechanics, pain science, injury recovery, and nervous system work. In my Teaching Students with Injuries mentorship program, I work with yoga teachers who've transformed from feeling helpless with injured students to becoming the teachers these students specifically seek out. These teachers aren't just offering better modifications, they're creating genuine healing experiences. Their students see measurable improvements in pain, range of motion, and quality of life. I'm going to help you understand ways you can help injured students beyond modifications and props, and why this is absolutely within your scope of practice, and exactly how to implement these approaches starting in your very next class. Here's how we'll get there. First, I'll show you the true cost of limiting yourself to modifications and props. Then I'll deconstruct the myths keeping you stuck. Finally, you'll realize you already have some tools in your toolbox to help injured students right now. First, let me explain to you exactly what it's costing you to believe that modifications and props are all you can offer. The average yoga teacher charges $25 per class and teaches 8 to 12 classes per week. That's roughly $200 to $300 weekly, or $10,000 to $15,000 annually. Teachers who specialize in working with injured students charge anywhere from $40 to $60 per class. They teach private clients at somewhere between $100 and $125 per hour and often develop specialized programs. They're making at least $25,000 to $40,000 annually from the same time investment. But let's go deeper than just money. Every injured student who leaves your class feeling unsupported becomes someone who tells others that yoga doesn't help with injuries. That's negative word of mouth that impacts your entire community. Every injured student you could have helped but didn't because you felt unqualified represents a missed opportunity to create a genuine healing experience. What really honestly breaks my heart is that most yoga teachers entered this profession because you wanted to help people heal and transform. When you limit yourself to modifications and props, you're settling for being a pose adjuster instead of being a transformational yoga teacher. Over a 10-year teaching career, if you help just one injured student per month through comprehensive approaches, that's 120 lives transformed. Each of those students tells others, refers friends, and becomes an advocate for therapeutic yoga. But if you stick to modifications and props, you remain invisible in the therapeutic space, struggling for students while specialized teachers are building waitlists. The question isn't whether you can afford to lean into these approaches. The question is, what is it costing you every single day not to know how to implement them? I wonder if every time you think about doing more than modifications, that little voice pops up and whispers, that's not in my scope of practice. But let's examine what's actually in your scope versus what you've been told is in your scope. You are legally allowed to educate students about movement and anatomy. You are allowed to teach breathing techniques that affect nervous system regulation. You're allowed to guide students through progressive movement experiences and provide information about pain science and healing. And you're allowed to create environments that support nervous system safety. Notice what's missing from that list: diagnosis, treatment, or medical advice. But education, guidance, and creating healing environments, that is absolutely what movement teachers do. The truth is, saying that's not my scope has been a way to avoid the discomfort of learning something new, not a genuine legal boundary. If you think to yourself, I don't know enough about injuries, the thing is, you already know enough to offer modifications and props, right? So you do know something about injuries and how movement affects them. The question isn't whether you know enough, it's whether you're using everything you already know and whether you're willing to learn the additional pieces that would make you truly effective. You probably know more about anatomy than you think you do. You just don't know how to apply it therapeutically beyond pose modifications. Here's what I used to think: what if I make someone worse? This fear is completely understandable. But let me ask you, what if your current approach of modifications and props isn't helping and students are getting worse anyway? What if by not addressing the nervous system component of pain, not educating about movement, not working with breath and stress patterns, you're actually missing opportunities to help them improve? The approaches I'm going to share with you are designed to be safe, progressive, and based on how healing actually occurs in the body. You're not going to make anyone worse by helping them understand their nervous system or teaching them therapeutic breathing. The fundamental myth underlying all of these little voices in our heads is this: helping injured students requires medical training and puts me at legal risk. This myth has been perpetuated by yoga teacher training programs that are terrified of liability and by a medical system that wants to maintain monopoly over anything related to pain and injury. The reality is, movement educators like yoga teachers are uniquely positioned to help injured students in ways that medical professionals often can't. We see students weekly, sometimes multiple times a week. We observe their movement patterns, their stress responses, their relationship with their bodies. We have the time and space to address the psychological and nervous system components of pain that medical appointments rarely allow for. Let me tell you about two teachers that I've worked with. Teacher A believed the myth completely. When injured students came to class, she immediately referred them to physical therapy and told them to come back when they were better. She saw herself as unqualified to help. Teacher B understood that movement education is therapeutic. She learned to work with nervous systems, educate about pain science, and create healing environments. Her classes became known as safe spaces for people with injuries. 1 year later, Teacher A was still struggling to fill her classes, while Teacher B had a waiting list and was making twice as much money working with the exact students Teacher A was turning away. The difference wasn't in their training, they had identical certifications. The difference was their understanding of their role. Teacher B realized that yoga teachers aren't trying to compete with medical professionals. We're filling a gap that medical professionals can't fill. We're the movement educators who help people rebuild trust with their bodies, understand their nervous systems, and develop sustainable self-care practices. This isn't about overstepping scope, it's about fully stepping into the scope you already have. Now, it's time to completely reframe how you think about your role with injured students. From I'm a yoga teacher who offers pose modifications to accommodate injuries to I'm a movement educator who helps people heal their relationship with their bodies through nervous system regulation, education, and therapeutic movement experiences. But how? Think of healing from injury as a triangle with three essential components: medical care, that's the diagnosis, the treatment, and medication if needed; physical therapy, specific rehabilitation exercises, and maybe some manual therapy; and movement education, the nervous system work, pain education, movement confidence building, and long term self care practices. Most injured people get components 1 and 2, but component 3, which is where yoga teachers excel, is often completely missing. You have something medical professionals don't have: ongoing relationship, group support, holistic approach, time and space for education, and focus on the whole person and not just the injury. You're not trying to replace medical care or physical therapy. You are the bridge between rehabilitation and long term wellness. You're where people come to rebuild confidence, learn self care, and develop a sustainable relationship with movement. When you understand this, everything changes. Instead of seeing injured students as people you need to accommodate, you see them as people you're uniquely positioned to help heal. Instead of offering modifications as consolation prizes, you offer comprehensive experiences that address all the components of healing that often get overlooked in medical settings. When you make this shift, you don't just help individual students, you change how your entire community understands the role of movement in healing. You become part of the solution to our healthcare crisis, not just someone who accommodates its limitations. Let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable. If you have the ability to help injured students heal and you choose not to because it feels outside of your comfort zone, what does that say about your commitment to your students' well being? Every day you limit yourself to modifications and props. You're actively choosing to let students struggle with pain you could help address, reinforce their belief that yoga isn't for people like them. You miss opportunities to create genuine transformation, and you maintain a limited view of your own capabilities and impact. Here's the contradiction I see constantly. Teachers who say they became a yoga instructor to help people heal, but then refuse to learn the tools that would actually help people heal. Teachers who spend hundreds of dollars on workshops about advanced poses that serve healthy students, but won't invest in learning to help students who need them the most. Teachers who confidently guide students through complex physical poses but feel unqualified to teach breathing techniques that could reduce their students' pain. To be honest, when an injured student leaves your class feeling unsupported, they don't think, oh, she was staying in her scope of practice. They think yoga doesn't work for people like me. When you refer every injured student to physical therapy, you're essentially saying, I can't help you, which may be true now, but only because you're choosing not to develop the skills that would actually allow you to help. Every week you wait to learn these approaches is another week of students walking into your classes hoping for support and leaving disappointed. Every month you stay in the modifications and props only mindset is another month of missed opportunities to be the transformational teacher you dreamed of becoming. This is a choice you're making every single day. You can choose to remain limited, or you can choose to step into the full potential of what movement education can offer. Which choice aligns with why you became a yoga teacher in the first place? Let's talk about what you're really afraid of. That little voice that says, what if I try to help and I make things worse? What if I hurt someone? What if I get sued? I understand. When I first started working more comprehensively with students with injuries, I was terrified. Every time I suggested a breathing exercise or explained pain science, I was worried I was overstepping. But here's what I've learned in the last 13 years and working with thousands of students. The approaches I'm talking about, nervous system education, therapeutic breathing, creating safety, movement re-education, these are inherently safe practices. You're not manipulating spines or prescribing treatments. You're teaching breathing, providing education, and creating supportive environments. The risk of harm from these approaches is virtually zero. What's actually riskier? Teaching someone therapeutic breathing techniques or leaving them in a chronic state of nervous system dysregulation that perpetuates their pain? Educating someone about how pain works, or leaving them with catastrophic thinking patterns that make their conditions worse, or creating a safe environment for movement exploration, or reinforcing their belief that movement is dangerous. The way you protect yourself isn't by avoiding helping people, it's by helping them with appropriate boundaries. Document your approach, stay within educational frameworks, and refer when appropriate. Here's what changed everything for me. I realized that confidence comes from competence. The more I learned about nervous systems, pain science, and therapeutic approaches, the more confident I became. Fear decreases as knowledge increases. Right now, you feel afraid because you're operating in unknown territory. But once you have frameworks, tools, and understanding, that fear transforms into confidence. You don't have to figure this out alone. Your fear is valid, but it shouldn't determine your impact. Every transformational teacher has felt this fear and chosen to move through it anyway. So you have a choice to make right now, and it's not really about learning new techniques. It's about deciding who you are as a teacher. Path one, continue as a modifications and props teacher, continue referring injured students elsewhere, keep feeling helpless when people in pain walk into your classes. In 5 years, you'll still be wondering why you can't seem to build the practice or the teaching career that you dreamed of. Or path two, Become a comprehensive movement educator. Learn to work with nervous systems, educate about pain, and create genuine healing experiences. In 5 years, you'll be the teacher that injured students specifically seek out. The next time an injured student walks into your class, ask yourself, am I going to be the teacher who accommodates their limitation or the teacher who helps them transcend it? This isn't about adding more to your teaching. It's about using everything you already have in service of healing. You already know anatomy, breathing, movement, and how to create safe spaces. You just need to know how to apply these tools therapeutically. If you're ready to stop limiting yourself to modifications and props, if you want to become the transformational teacher you entered this profession to be, then I invite you to learn more about my Teaching Students with Injuries mentorship program. This is where yoga teachers learn to work confidently and comprehensively with any student who walks into their class, not through more pose modifications, but through understanding how healing actually works and how to facilitate it through movement education. Because the world doesn't need another teacher who accommodates injuries, the world needs teachers who help people heal from them.